In this video I'd like to talk about the positions with isolated pawns, and there's a number of ways in which these positions can emerge. They're pretty typical for the Caro-Kann defense in the Panov attack, which is basically this position. And one of the common lines is knight to c6, after which white can play bishop g5. And in this game that I played a few years ago, my opponent played here queen to a5, and the position simplified a little bit, but the typical features remain in that at some point white ends up with the isolated queen pawn here, and black is aiming to attack it, in this variation actually as soon as possible. So naturally white defends it. Black puts more pressure, which is a little ambitious because the queen side is still underdeveloped, and after white moves the queen to a better square, here black has to basically here black has to decide how to to continue, and there are some challenges because developing the pieces here is not terribly easy, and some moves like bishop d7, they would probably reduce the pressure on this pawn a little bit, so black does not want to do that yet. Some moves like b6 would probably weaken this diagonal a little bit too much, and that might be a challenge, something that black wants to avoid, and like weaken this knight temporarily here. So so here black aimed for the slightly too ambitious approach. He played pawn to a6, which aims to play b5 potentially, and develop his bishop that way. I think that was the idea, at least. And I should have here realized that this delay of development of the queen side with a6 should be punished, and if I don't punish it, I'll end up in the worst position, which is what happened. Well, let's first look at what happened in the game. So here I went knight to e4, which seems aggressive and attacks this bishop, but it allows black to regroup the pieces to to better squares, and here exchanging on f6 is not in my favor, and eventually black is able to, with some precise moves, to contain my initiative, and actually in this position I ended up being even worse because the queens come off the board, and I and I still have the isolated pawn. So there's some risk in playing the way I played, and I should have been in the worst position I could. After this, I was kind of lucky to not lose in this game because the pawn is still weak. So that was the problem with playing knight to e4, and instead, of course, we should always be looking in these positions for a breakthrough in the center. And even though I was pretty familiar with the idea, I guess I wasn't familiar with the idea enough at that time, and I overlooked the move that I should have played. And of course, d5 here. d5 here was the best move. Black pretty much has to take, and here the key idea. The idea here is that I should be taking with the rook, and here black has to play very precisely. A simple variation is like this: takes, he gets checkmated because the bishop is still blocking the rook. So black has to play only moves. If he goes b5, well, he ends up getting pinned further and he doesn't make any progress. So his only move is probably queen to c7. And if white wants to, he can just continue to build up the initiative with like natural moves like rook d1, rook e1. There's no risk here whatsoever. White has always a comfortable position, slightly better, and if white wants to, he can even go for more, and the initiative here continues to be very strong. For example, knight to e4, this threatens the bishop on f6 and like threatens to ruin black's pawn structure. So black has to, you know, accept the challenge and take the extra pawn. And then when the bishop is harassed, black is here facing a very dangerous attack. He is weak on f7, he's weak on h7. At any point, white can really take on f6, well, at least in this position, and get a great compensation for the pawn. Black here has to find really only moves, and this is not easy in this position. Like any move here that is inaccurate will basically lose for black. For example, why is this move so important? Why can't I just defend the pawn like this? Well, then you're gonna lose after this move, right? And then f6 will be impossible to defend. So black has to play very, very precisely, and the best he can probably get is some kind of equality. White continues to build up threats like knight to h5, or he can place the knight to f5. And again, black has just great difficulties here, even though he's up a pawn. A sample variation could go like this. Here the idea is that if he takes, then there's a discovered check, so the king has to run. And white regains the material, and he still has a better position because he's got a more compact pawn structure. So I won't go further, but the point is that moves like d5, they must be always, you know, looked at first. And here both I and my opponent completely ignored it in our analysis of the position. And it's only many years later that I reviewed this game and found this kind of possibility, even though it's the most natural move in the position.